everybody. Okay, everybody ready to get started? My name is John Bash. I'm the U.S. Attorney here in the Western District of Texas. I'm joined by a number of folks, by ATF Special Agent in Charge Fred Milanowski, by FBI Special Agent in Charge Chris Combs, by Chief Brian Manley of the APD, by District Attorney of Travis County Margaret Moore, and her staff, First Assistant Mindy Monford, and ADA Keith Henneke. And also joined, by Brian Garner, Resident Agent in Charge of the ATF, and then a number of members of my staff. Our new First Assistant United States Attorney as of about a week ago, Ashley Hoff, who was the Austin City Chief during the bombings investigation, Deputy Austin City Chief Michelle Fernald, and AUSA's Mike Galdo and Matt Harding. We're here today to announce that earlier today, U.S. Magistrate Judge Mark Lane dismissed a complaint that my office had filed on March 20th against Mark Condit of Pflugerville, Texas, in connection with the bombings investigation. Magistrate Judge Lane also unsealed, in part, an affidavit that we filed in support of that complaint, also on March 20th. As you all know, Mr. Condit killed himself a couple hours after we filed that complaint, but we have been waiting to ensure that his remains were confirmed and identified, and to determine which parts of that affidavit could be unsealed consistent with public safety and investigative needs. So the Travis County Medical Examiner, in conjunction with the Round Rock Justice of the Peace, Dane Johnson, determined that those were in fact his remains. We then started the process of determining what part of that affidavit could be unsealed. As I'm sure you all know, the press has a qualified right of access to judicial records, and so judges balance security needs, safety needs, investigative needs against the right of the public to know what's in court documents. And so today we've furnished to you the partially redacted affidavit. And that explains our basis for probable cause on the night of March 20th to seek an arrest warrant and to file a criminal complaint against Mark Condit. The thing that we charged him with at the time was one count of the unlawful possession and transfer of a destructive device. That is an offense under the National Firearms Act, a very old statute from the 1930s. It's actually found in the Internal Revenue Code, if you can believe it. That does not mean that was the only thing we would have charged him with, nor does it mean that District Attorney Moore would not have also charged him with state-level offenses. That offense was included just so we could get the complaint on file and obtain the arrest warrant and pick him up and bring him into custody. Very likely we would have sought an indictment after that that included far more serious charges than the destructive device charge. So if you're wondering, hey, why is this the only charge in the complaint, that's why. So just a couple things to follow up on, and then we'll turn it over for questions. One, the investigation continues. We're looking at his intent, his motivations. There are no further suspects at this time, and we do not have any reason to believe there's a further destructive device out there, although the public should remain vigilant for suspicious packages. But we are looking through very voluminous computer records to examine his intent and motivations, and so there is still an ongoing investigation. And we do urge the public to remain vigilant about suspicious packages and to contact the APD if you notice a suspicious package. Second, I want to reiterate what we've said a number of times, which is that there was unbelievable cooperation between federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies. And speaking personally, I know we had great cooperation with the District Attorney's Office. We were kind of hand in hand throughout the investigation, thinking about what were our legal avenues for investigative techniques, what charges would we bring, and so forth. So it was great cooperation. And in fact, far before this event occurred, everybody up here had been working together to set up a crisis center to be ready for just this kind of thing. And so we were ready to go to get all our resources together and coordinated and on the same track when we realized we had a serial bomber on our hands here. Finally, this is National Crime Victims Awareness Week, or Crime Victims' Rights Week, I should say. And just want to again reiterate our sympathy for the families of the victims and for the surviving victims. Two innocent lives were lost here, and others were horrifically injured. And we want to make sure the victims are front and center as we think about this case, think about what to do going forward, and conclude the investigation. With that, I will turn it over to questions, and you can ask me questions. I might turn a couple over to my colleagues if that makes more sense.
So can you explain to us why this complaint is being dismissed? I think I know why, but I just want you to spell it out for me.
The defendant is dead, so there's not going to be a prosecution.
Hi. Yeah, it says here that one of the packages was had the address of 6705 Galindo. Does that suggest that the home, the places were targeted? Because we've been led to believe that they were random.
Well, I think when people have spoken of random, they mean the lack of a connection between the suspect or between the different targets, not that there was no address on the package.
Do you still
You know.
believe that Mark Condon worked alone?
There are no other suspects in custody at this time, and we have no reason to believe that there are other suspects. But as I said, the investigation's ongoing, so I don't want to close the book on that. But no other suspects are in custody at this time.
Did those people you talked to include the roommates that, of the multiple other individuals were investigated for potential?
Investigators have talked with roommates, yes.
And have they been cleared, or what's their status?
They're not in custody at this time, but the investigation is ongoing.
Prior to the Home Depot surveillance video, can you give us some information on how you already had a photograph of the content that you consider as confidential source to match it up with that?
Turn that over to either Special Agent Milanowski. I'm not sure if that's
There
public
wasn't a
or not.
confidential source, but the photograph, we had a photograph from when Mark Condon delivered the 2 packages at the FedEx facility. That was the first time, and obviously, that was the first time we had any photographs of this individual.
Could you clarify how Bryce came onto your map? How did that purchase turn up in your investigation?
Sorry, ask that again?
How did the purchases at Bryce end up in your radar?
So when we investigate a bombing, one of the first things we do is our explosive specialists put the device back together. So then we identify what components are used, and then we go out to stores that sell those components or similar components and start identifying individuals that have purchased either one or multiple components. So that was done in stores throughout the metro area.
At any point, will the recording of the confession be released at any point, or possibly dash cam video from the SWAT officers that responded that day? That will be done.
So there is video that we have of the takedown of the suspect in this incident of the bomber, and there is still an ongoing investigation because, as you all will recall, it also resulted in an officer-involved shooting after he detonated that bomb. So that is still an ongoing investigation, and we're going to wait for the Williamson County District Attorney's Office to close out their review of that case before we make a determination on the video involved in the takedown where the bomber detonated. As far as the videotaped confession that we have, as I've said before, we're in the middle of an investigation right now, so it would not be appropriate to release that at this time. I know there is a great public interest in this tape, and I know this police department, we have a history of being transparent with our community, and at the appropriate time, we will weigh the interests of the community versus the public safety concerns. And to speak a little bit more about those public safety concerns, Special Agent Christopher Combs of the FBI, Special Agent in charge, will speak to that.
We do have some concerns with the release of that audio tape. And the reason we do that is when you look at past active shooters or mass murderers, what we find is they study the previous events. And we find that sometimes these videos, these postings, are, I hate to use the word inspirational, but it's inspirational for future people who are thinking about these acts. So we have discussed this issue with our federal and local partners about, is there a value in releasing the audio? We are concerned that it could inspire other people to do other acts. The subject in the audio confession says a number of statements that concern us, and we just don't want that to live forever on the internet. There's obviously a discussion between public disclosure and openness. I understand that 100%. But from the review of looking at active shooters, from the review of past criminals, we are very concerned, and the last thing we want is this to inspire somebody else.
Is it videotape or an audio tape, sir?
It is actually, it's a videotape that only has audio.
Would releasing a transcript be part of the possibilities going ahead?
We've discussed that. We're in process right now to discuss how do we meet the public's desire to know versus the public safety concerns that we have. So there's a debate going on right now. What do we do? What's the right way to answer this question? We don't have the answer yet, to be quite honest. And as the chief said, It's still an active investigation, so either way, we're not prepared to release it.
Who was the final call in releasing or withholding the video?
Well, I think first you have to deal with the investigation of the officer-involved shooting, and then it's a discussion between all of us as to what is the proper way to go forward.
Looking at the victims, were these victims chosen at random, or is there some commonality between them that caused the attacks?
As I said earlier, the investigation to motive intent is ongoing. I have not seen information so far to believe that there is a common link between the victims, but the investigation into intent is ongoing. So I don't want to say that definitively until the investigation is complete.
At what point did the red Ford pickup become a point of interest in the investigation?
And I'm trying to make sure I don't say anything that's not in the public record. But certainly I believe this has been public in the affidavit, the FedEx clerk saw a red truck.
Was that the turning point in the investigation?
I don't know that there was a single turning point. This all happened very quickly, as you'll see from the affidavit on March 20th. And as soon as we had probable cause, we were like that on getting a complaint and an arrest warrant. But it was really kind of a mosaic. I mean, there were different pieces that came together, which is oftentimes in real investigations how it happens. There's a number of pieces that come together that increase the probability that a certain person is probably the guy. And I don't know that there was a single climactic moment in the investigation.
Were any bombs set off after you were pretty sure you had the guy in this incident?
Sorry, what'd you say?
Were any bombs set off after you were pretty sure you had the guy who was committing the bombs?
I don't believe so, no. No.
Only the one he detonated himself with.
Only the one he detonated himself with, of course. And let's do two more, one here and then.
I'm sorry. Are those two stores that are referenced here the only ones that items were purchased from for the shrapnel? Or were there others? Because I was told that on the Ace Hardware 29, some of you guys were there before that.
You know, I don't want to say whether there were or there weren't, because that's still there's still an investigation going on, and whether there were or weren't is not part of the public record, and then I'd have to start answering every question about what.
Thank you.
Yes, sir, you say that the investigation is ongoing, yet the suspect is dead. What unanswered questions are out there?
Well, as I said earlier, his motivation and intent, and of course, we want to make absolutely certain that there was nobody else involved. I think let's do the one last one, and then we're out.
You see a couple of details in some of the materials that we use. I'd like to ask if we can get an idea of just how sophisticated these bombs were, and if you discovered yet how he might have self-trained.
I think that's a good question for Special Agent Malinowski.
Thank you. As far as sophistication, there took a certain level of sophistication in order to build these devices and obviously not have an accidental detonation. And so we do feel that, he had some level. He probably had practiced somewhere. There's probably a field, somewhere that has other pieces from where he practiced. But they weren't, overly sophisticated. But they did have some level of sophistication. And as we talked about, the one trip wire device was a little more sophisticated than his other ones, which concerned us. So that's as far as I can tell you on sophistication. Obviously, ongoing investigation, still looking at a lot of information. We still have a lot of leads to follow up on. This will be, months more than weeks as far as us finishing up this investigation.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming.
We have a point of clarification on the bomb.
Sorry.
In the affidavit, it says that PVC pipe and shrapnel was found in one that was not exploded. It's the same material used in all of them. You mentioned this level of sophistication. I want to make sure I understand your significance.
What I'll say about the components is that they were pretty consistent throughout all 7 devices, in addition to consistent with what we found at the search warrant at his residence.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody.
Yeah.